USA Junior on proposition. And debate India on opposition. Okay, the motion on the floor is this House believes that all countries should have the right to nuclear weapons. I would call on the first proposition speaker to open the debate.
Network getting now? Okay, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, when Kim Jong-un to celebrate his birthday set off a nuclear weapon, we need to understand that nuclear weapons are a very real thing in our society. Countries have them, and they're a legitimate threat to our society. As first speaker of the side proposition, I'll be speaking about why principally we should allow countries the right to possess these nuclear weapons. My second speaker, Saxon, will be speaking about the power dynamics involved in society and what we do when we actually allow the right to have them. But before we like that, we'd like to do some contextualization and tell you what this debate is and isn't about. We tell you this debate isn't about the harms of nuclear weapons, because we can see that there are very real harms to this. But what this debate is about is whether the countries who principally have the right to have these nuclear weapons to use for their own self-defense, and we'll be proving to you through our core questions of principally why we need to give the countries this right, and secondly, furthermore, why we believe these countries, furthermore, when having these nuclear weapons, deserve the right even more. So let's just look at some ideas of context and the status quo. We have 3 points of context here. First, we have the idea of status quo. What we need to understand is a vast majority of countries don't have nuclear weapons. No, thank you, ma'am. Why is this? Because when in the 60s in the nuclear war, just after the Cold War ended, countries signed a UN declaration that prohibited the right for them to own nuclear weapons. We think this was important and significant then, because everyone had just come out of a very real scare of how horrible and atrocious nuclear weapons actually are. We think that was important then. But what we need to understand is that in today's society, countries like the USA, countries like North Korea, countries like Russia actually do possess nuclear weapons. We think this is particularly important to note because the context now is that these weapons are here, these weapons exist within society, and that's what we need to understand this debate. This debate isn't about whether we should allow them to exist at all. This debate is about the fact that they already exist. Given that they exist, what can we do about this and what's the best way to protect individuals? So the second idea we have through is like, what does it mean if we give countries the right to use nuclear weapons? We tell you have 2 outcomes likely here. We either tell you that countries will buy into this idea and give themselves the nuclear weapons because they believe it's absolutely necessary for the country. The second case scenario, what we have to understand is this is an opt-in and opt-out system. By saying we give countries the right, we're not saying they automatically need to have nuclear weapons. We think a country's choice is important. Why is a country's choice important? So we have 2 actors here who are likely not opt into this. Firstly, the country who simply cannot afford it, and we need to understand it's a threat. What we tell you this country can do in the case of like there actually being a nuclear threat is that they can form alliances like has happened in World War II, when countries such as the USA and England and Britain formed an alliance. We think that's where they can get the help from. The second, we tell you that this country can actually make a peaceful decision to choose. They believe the use of nuclear weapons is not principally justified and wrong. What we then tell you, this country is still very valuable in this debate, because they act like Switzerland did in World War I and II. We think we value Switzerland as a neutral actor for 2 reasons. Firstly, because of the idea that obviously one less country participating in the war, but secondly, because of the idea of their neutrality, that they were on neither side and to allow some sort of peaceful negotiations, because Switzerland was the middleman who could believe the fact that we think it's really important to have this country together. We think the fact that we have a middle ground and a neutral point for this debate is specifically important. And the third point of context is just like the idea that once we're giving countries the right, doesn't mean that like all countries are going to suddenly have nuclear weapons and then use it next Tuesday. We don't think this is realistic in today's society, and we're proving to you why, given the nature of nuclear warfare. So that one out that no thank you. What we principally prove to you here is 3 things. Firstly, the idea that this is a principal debate and how we best protect the individuals from status quo. Secondly, that just because we have nuclear weapons doesn't mean that they're going to be used, no thank you. And thirdly and lastly, the idea of the fact that we're giving countries a choice to opt in and out, given that they can choose what they think is best for them. That one, so no thank you. So now we'd like to move on to my first point of positive matter, which is kind of principally why we should give countries this right and what benefits we can out of it. And here we prove to you that it's absolutely necessary to give this benefit because of the fact of what stems from this benefit and what stems from actually having given countries its rights. And I have 3 points on that here. First, we tell you, like, why should a country have the right to self-defense? We think that when a country is under threat of being bombed by North Korea, when South Korea is unable to do anything to defend themselves despite being right on the border of a nuclear hotspot, we think it's particularly problematic. Even though science something 60 years ago was like no longer active in today's society, they don't have this right to protect themselves anymore. We think in the same way that we should say that self-defense is justified when an attacker comes at you, we think in the same way these countries are justified because it means self-defense. But then secondly, why is it the best form of self-defense? We tell you because given the technology of person at this time, you can't like a nuclear weapon shield that simply doesn't exist. We also tell you that sending things in with like the old school military tactics simply isn't going to work. Because we believe that when the war happens, if the war happens, there's to be in the case of a nuclear thing and you need to fight nuclear weapons. No, thank you, ma'am. So what we here to prove to you is that two things. Firstly, the country should have the right to self-defense. Because we always allow a woman who's being raped to fight back. We think this is important because it proves that a country who's being brutalized by another country, who's under definite threat, should be able to fight back and principally defend themselves.
That one right
there.
At the point at which most countries don't want to or can't afford these nuclear weapons, how is this right absolute?
Okay, so we tell you this right doesn't necessarily need to be absolute. Because the right isn't absolute in the form that it is actively carried out. The right isn't absolute because we've given countries the choice to have this right and what this right means. So tell you that's where the right being absolute comes in. Right being absolute does not mean you have to prove in any way that all countries are going to have nuclear weapons. That's an unrealistic burden to place on us. So the second point of things, what type of wars, and how we characterize what nuclear wars actually are, and how these weapons play such a role. So what we need to understand is that a nuclear weapon is a weapon of mass destruction that has the potential to hurt and destroy many things. What we need to therefore understand is we look at the scenario where there was potentially a nuclear war in the past, we look at the Cold War. Why was this war called the Cold War? Is a really interesting question to ask ourselves. We tell you it's a Cold War because of the fact that it never got hot. There were never friction within the war. We tell you it's a Cold War because it's purely based on threats of what one country would do to another country, because that's the way that the characteristics of nuclear weaponry warfare works. We don't think it's like countries going to drop arbitrarily because they discuss and they know the harm of this. We think nuclear weaponry warfare is primarily a warfare of threats and saying, given that I have these resources, I could potentially use them. This is why you shouldn't do certain things. We don't think it's a war that's being fought on the ground. We think it's up in a war and up in principle. So then what does this mean? So if we told you of the Cold War and that people are scared of this, we think that we have furthermore like ideas of the fact that countries have like the mindset and countries have the rationality to just decide whether they're going to use these nuclear weapons or not. We tell you a few examples of Pearl Harbor. We tell you when the Americans knew that Pearl Harbor was going to be bombed, but actually chose not to respond to this threat. Why was it important? It was important because of the fact that they could gain the military advantage and win the war ultimately as a result of this. We think it's important because it just shows how these prioritizations work, that sometimes we need to have the best interest in mind, even if it means carrying certain damage across the way. This just proves that the government is a rational actor. And thirdly, the idea of the fact that security leads to repercussions. So we tell you when people know there's such an idea of like horrible harms, they're less likely to hit you. We tell you in the same way that because if you have all these nuclear weapons and can easily come back to this country who has all those nuclear weapons, we don't think that people are going to want to use them. When we see the devastation occurring in Fukushima, in Nagasaki, and in Hiroshima, because of the nuclear weapons used previously, we think countries know the precedent. But furthermore, we believe that they're not going to be using these weapons in the same way, because when you hit someone, they hit you hard. Again, using the example of Pearl Harbor, they went and bombed a few ships at Pearl Harbor, but then Americans came back and mined the entire cities. We think this is important because it just shows that you're ultimately going to incur the most damage. Ladies and gentlemen, if you stand with the side that believes in allowing a country the right to self-defense, you stand beside proposition.
Spoke for 8 minutes, 12 seconds. 8-1-2.
I thank the first proposition speaker and I would like to recognize the first opposition speaker to open the opposition speaker.
Proposition's case today is basically a defense of an unethical and tokenistic principle. They are basically saying countries have the right to cause mass destruction. They are saying DPRK has the right to bomb a South Korean city full of innocent civilians. We don't see how that's morally or principally justified in any way, right? What do we do in today's debate? We can either prove to you that this is an illegitimate right to give countries, or we can prove to you that there are negative outcomes that stem from this. When we do either of these, we stand to win this debate. They are not contingent on each other. So, how do we see this debate? On side propositions, right? We think that on side opposition, we think no country, however powerful, influential, or in USA's case, just plain warmongering, has the right to possess nuclear weapons, right? We don't think anybody has the right to destroy whole cities indiscriminately. We don't think anybody has the right to commit mass murder, right? No one has the right or the necessity for this to use these kinds of nuclear weapons against innocent civilians, right? And we regret the existence of nuclear weapons. However, we admit that we can't change the fact that they already exist in the world today. We just think that the driving principle when it comes to engagement with nuclear weapons should be overall non-proliferation, not the opposite, which is what proposition proposes, right? We are happy that powerful states are preventing other states from getting more nuclear weapons. We don't think there needs to be more weapons of mass destruction in the world today. Before I move on to my three points of constructive, a few points of rebuttal, right? Side of proposition's first speaker made only one argument. They said that all countries have the right to self-defense, right? And they say that this is the only way you can gain this right. However, they tell us that most countries, they themselves admit that most countries are not rich enough for this. Most countries don't have the resources. Most countries are not diplomatically important enough to create alliances with other countries who have these nuclear weapons. But they still tell us that this right to self-defense is absolute. We don't see how that stands when it's a right that's based on the criteria of privilege. It's based on the criteria of how rich you are as a country, and it's based on the criteria of what resources you arbitrarily possess. We don't think it's a right, and we don't think they protect any extra people on their side simply because there's already nuclear deadlocks that exist all over the world today, right? Every country has a face-off with some other country if they possess nuclear weapons, and no country is capable of bombing another country simply because there are nuclear deadlocks. We think if you add nuclear weapons to that situation, you create unnecessary conflict. We don't see how that protects anybody, how that saves more people, and we don't understand how their principles stand in these cases. Another thing they didn't clarify is would they give this right to nuclear weapons to any state, regardless of circumstance? Do you think even rogue states should have this right? Volatile states like North Korea, states like Iran, who when possessing nuclear weapons would cause mass proliferation in that area and create even more conflict? We don't think they've answered any of these questions. We think that's inherently problematic because in the case that those countries have the right to cause mass destruction, the right to proliferate nuclear weapons, we think that causes more people to die, and this is totally dependent on outcomes, right? They can't claim that this is a principled debate because people are dying, and we think the lives of these people are what matter in this debate and not this principle that proposition claims this is about. With that, I'll move on to my arguments.
So, ma'am, if you're telling us that, if you're telling us that your side is relevant in this debate because of the fact that no country should have the right to nuclear weapons, how is your side so relevant when these countries already have the nuclear weapons?
So we think that proposition has missed the point in the whole, right? We tell you that these countries have nuclear weapons, it's regrettable, but that doesn't change on their side. We just think that on their side there are going to be more nuclear weapons on the whole. However, the richer you are as a country, the more nuclear weapons you're going to possess, the more power you're going to have. That power difference doesn't change on their side. We think that takes down their principle altogether. With that, I'll move to how this is not principally justified to give this to all countries, right? Rights should be based on certain criteria. We don't think rights are absolute. We don't think countries should have this right in the case that they cause more harm than good when they possess these nuclear weapons. And we think there is a point at which Kim Jong-un is so volatile and active that he can decide on a whim to bomb a South Korean city. He doesn't have the right to possess nuclear weapons, right? And we don't think that this exists in a vacuum. We right? If they say South Korea has the right to nuclear weapons, that doesn't change anything. We don't think it's going to protect them any better. We just think it's going to lead to escalation. We think North Korea will now want more nuclear weapons, which will now lead to South Korea wanting even more nuclear weapons. That leads to just basically more weapons of mass destruction in a region that is already so very volatile. We don't see how this is a right. How can this be a right when it is contingent on so many factors, right? How is this a right when it is contingent on you being a country of privilege, on you being a country that has enough resources, that countries that have nuclear weapons take an interest in you and take an interest in your resources and decide to ally with you? We don't see how that right is absolute. They haven't told us this. So what do we tell you on our side? We tell you that this leads to an escalation of proliferation rates, right? When you give this supposed right to countries, they feel the need to acquire nuclear weapons. When you tell them that they have the right to nuclear weapons, they will proliferate, and their rivals in the region will now feel the need to acquire the nukes in the same capacity, because who wants to be on a back foot when it comes to your enemies, right? We think in the case of Iran, that means if you allow the Iran government to simply proliferate as many nuclear weapons as they wish to. We think Saudi Arabia will now want nuclear weapons. Bahrain wants nuclear weapons. We think that just leads to an overall escalation of the tension in an already volatile region, right? This adds a large number of weapons of mass destruction that can cause harm over generations, that cause cancer, right? That cause deformation. These are not effects that stop within the century even, right? We don't think any of that is fair at all. We don't see how that is a right for people to be allowed to cause this. How does this manifest at a global level, right? Now all countries, even those who didn't want or previously had nuclear weapons, have to proliferate nuclear weapons in order to counter their neighbors who are doing it also, right? Because now they have the right and now they need to counter their neighbors. So what happens? No country has the right to tell you to stop proliferating nuclear weapons. We think that takes out all trust between countries, right? We think that takes out all these alliances that have formed over decades, that have taken so much work. We think that creates a culture of distrust, and we think that's hugely problematic, right? We think that prevents countries from being able to ally, and it prevents countries from being able to protect the citizens in countries who are not as powerful as them. We think that's very, very dangerous in the case that these people are now dying and these people are now being attacked on several levels, right? We think that this creates disproportionate harm on so many levels. They gave us this example of Pearl Harbor. We tell you that Japan bombed a simple military base and America took out two cities and hundreds of thousands of people. We don't see how that's proportional, right? We tell you that this causes disproportionate violence. We don't see how they can justify that as a moral obligation for people to have as a right, right? We tell you that is why proposition today is wrong. This is not a right that you have to give to anyone. We don't think anybody has the right to weapons of mass destruction. We are very, very troubled.
The speaker spoke for 8 minutes and 15 seconds. 815.
I thank the first opposition speaker and I would like to invite the second opposition speaker.
Panel, in today's world, evidence-based studies suggest that the biggest threat to society in the 2000s is one, terrorism, and secondly, the threat of nuclear warfare. It is a threat that we cannot just ignore in today's debate, and it's a threat that we need to actively act upon in today's debate because we recognize the potential harms for countries like South Korea should be completely obliterated in today's debate because they have no means of self-defense within the status quo. Firstly, we're going to be dealing with some rebuttal in today's debate, and then secondly, our points of substantive matter. We only have one point of rebuttal in today's debate, but many forms of analysis. Firstly, this idea about nuclear weapons and their ethical practices, right? We concede in today's debate, right, if we could have a realistic world where nuclear weapons didn't exist, we would love that. But we believe that that's a reality that we cannot accept in today's debate. One, because we believe that nuclear weaponry cannot just ultimately be obliterated off the face of the earth. You can't destroy nuclear weapons in today's debate. The only way that you can get rid of them is by igniting them and allowing them to completely obliterate other countries in today's debate. You can't just completely ignore that fact. Secondly, we told you that their cases exist within a completely non-existent realm of database, a world in which no countries or no powerful countries have nuclear weapons already. And we told you that's simply not true. Countries like Iran, the US, Russia, and North Korea all have evidence of nuclear weaponry. But even furthermore, they haven't just kept this nuclear weaponry. North Korea has actively used their nuclear weaponry in missile tests that haven't in fact been successful in today's debate. Secondly, we need to ask ourselves, will this war at deadlock actively happen? Because we believe that the reason that North Korea has the ability to just drop bombs whenever they think it is necessary, and the US has the ability to, the threat to counteract this, is because there's no, international body or no, international countries that are willing to threaten these countries and say, listen guys, if you act upon this, we're going to take this matter very seriously, right? Because we concede to the fact that nuclear weapons have the potential to be extremely detrimental in today's debate, but how do we, mediate this harm in today's society, right? We propose a threat upon these countries. North Korea just drops bombs, right? Because no international country has ever said, guys, you cannot do this, and we're going to propose warfare upon you if you don't do this. They still actively do this in today's debate. So we believe that this war ultimately will end the deadlock if we provide the right to this access. But secondly, we need to question this point, is the right actually absolute? And we believe that we're giving you this right, but you don't actually have to act upon it, right? We give you the choice to opt in and opt out, because if you believe that this is so detrimental and ethically not right, then you have the ability to form an alliance within the other international bodies that you concede with and practices that we believe are okay in today's debate. We believe that their case completely falls right on the point where they create a world where nuclear weaponry doesn't in fact exist, when one, there's no way of removing this nuclear weaponry in today's debate, but secondly, the fact is that this harm is here and it's happening in today's society, and that North Korea has the potential to bomb any country in the world and in fact obliterate the world at any second in today's debate, and this is a harm that we need to act upon in order to protect the world, not take them back now. Okay, let's move on to our points of substantive matter in today's debate. I'm going to be dealing with 2 points. One, what does this right actually mean if we're not talking about this right in a principled world and actively acting upon this and saying what happens when we actualize this debate in today's society? And secondly, this idea about how we alter power dynamics and the influence and potential that this has to create a better world in today's society. So let's move on to this point about what happens when this right already exists. So we concede to the fact, and we're going to tell you that facts show that in fact there is a presence of nuclear weaponry within society today, right? Iran, the US, Russia, and North Korea all have access to these things and have openly used them in today's debate. The problem in today's debate is not that we don't know that they exist, but that the fact the quantities of which they exist are unaware to the international community. We actively don't know how many nuclear weapons North Korea has or the US, and we believe that that harm is going to be very evident when you have the potential to just blow up any country at mass destruction, not taking thank you, man. So what happens when we allow people to have this right and we create this sort of sense of legality within our society and within the world? In today's debate. So we're going to tell you what we believe this ultimately leads to is this ability to limit and control the number of nuclear weaponry that exists within our society, and we're going to tell you how this exists. So we tell you that the reason that North Korea and Iran and other countries have the capacity to build at any rate that they wish to is that there's no imminent threat from other countries to say that if you exceed this harm, we're going to propose nuclear warfare upon you. There's no evident threat in today's society that dictates whether or not these countries can actually build nuclear weaponry. So what happens when we legalize this and we make it okay within society? We tell you that we create this international community that is, one, aware of the problem, but two, willing to act upon it if this problem ever occurs and is actualized in today's society. And we believe that allows for restrictions because we believe that countries like the UK will ultimately say, listen America, if you exceed this potential amount, we're going to act upon you and we don't believe this is okay. We feel that this was very prevalent in World War II, when England and the alliance said to Hitler that if you actively step into Poland, we're going to intervene and we don't believe that's okay. If you're going to exceed the number of nuclear weaponry that you have in today's debate, we're going to act upon you and we don't believe that that's okay. But we told you anyway how this threat is so detrimental, and this is something that they concede to in today's debate because that's the entirety of the case is principled on, that this nuclear weaponry is so detrimental. If this is so detrimental, we don't believe that that war will actively exist. But secondly, let's move on to our second point of substantive matter today, debate about how the alteration of power dynamics is particularly influential. So we believe that in today's society, we have a United Nations, I'll not take it now, man. Okay, we have a United Nations Security Council where 5 influential countries have the capacity capacity to dictate the security of the entire world, right? And we believe that that's extremely detrimental in today's debate, particularly if we look at Syria, where no action has been done to protect the individuals of Syria or protect like the situation that's going on because of a veto vote that says Russia will not intervene or America or any kind of protection will be afforded to these individuals in today's debate. And we find that extremely problematic that countries that once previously had political and social capital have the ability to dictate the world's security because we believe that there's forefront runners in today's society, such as South Korea or other influential parties that have come to the front and said that they have the capacity to also intervene in social issues and security issues. So we believe that what happens within this particular situation and what happens within the status quo that they're proposing, what happens when the threat of nuclear warfare becomes apparent, what we then tell countries is that you have to side with one or the other. You either have to side with a liberalist America, so to speak, or a dictatorial North Korea. And we believe then what we're doing is manipulating an individual country's ideologies to say that in order to protect your people, you need to compromise your own personal beliefs to side with the country that you don't necessarily believe in order to protect your people. That doesn't fulfill states' obligation in a sense, right? Because we believe that states have the obligation to protect all of its individuals without compromising their own personal beliefs in today's debate. So then what we believe is we want to create a society where countries have the capacity to protect themselves and not necessarily form alliances, even though we believe that these alliances are acceptable. But yes, let's take a few.
If this facilitation of this right depends on your privilege as a country, how does it eliminate the power balance in place?
But now we don't believe that the capacity to create nuclear weaponry is dependent on your privileges in today's society. As Daisy told you, you have the capacity to form alliances, and we believe that this is particular in today's debate because you form alliances with individuals based on your particular ideology. We don't believe that alliances are just formed because you want to, but rather you form alliances with countries that have the potential to act out in a particular way. So what we believe actively happens in today's society when we implement what we've told you. We tell you, one, that the threat of nuclear warfare already exists, and if we want countries like South Korea to actively intervene and be able to protect their citizens that have been openly oppressed by the people of North Korea, even government systems, for centuries, then we need to allow them to access nuclear warfare. But even more so, we need international countries, not just the five major social and economical powers that so-called exist within the United Nations Security Council, to step forward and say that we are going to take an active stance to prevent this. If you fall aside that best protects the world in today's debate and recognizes that this harm of nuclear weaponry is in fact apparent and is acted upon in today's society, then you're for side proposition.
Speaker spoke for 8 minutes, 13 seconds. 813.
I thank the second proposition speaker and I would like to recognize the second opposition speaker.
Panel. Firstly, we'd like to inform South Africa that DPRK, Iran, US and Russia have not actually fired nuclear weapons. They seem to think that this has happened. If this is what they are going to consistently debate about, we'd ask them to get their facts right. So what will I be doing in my speech today? First, I will be giving you some general rebuttals to their case, specifically on why the right to self-defense is not given to every country and actually disproportionately affects the poor. And then I will be telling you why, and then I will move on to my constructive on why this disproportionately affecting the poor countries affects a single individual in this country. So moving on to my rebuttals. The first thing that they told you is that the only way that you can get rid of nuclear weapons is by giving more nuclear weapons to more countries. We don't understand what they mean by this. We think that they are not really making any sense. We'd like to clarify that there is no country that is actively using nuclear weapons right now. No country is using What you do on your side is that you're giving them the right to actually use these weapons. We think that that is where it becomes problematic. You said that on our side that these countries can use the weapon if they want to because there is no threat against it. We think that that's what happens on your side. There is no threat because they have the right to be able to use this. Clearly, the number of weapons, nuclear weapons that exist in society today are enough of a threat to ensure that there are no nuclear weapons actually being utilized. So unless you prove to us why this right is actually necessary to decrease the conflict, why this right is actually necessary to ensure that there is no escalation of conflict, we have told you why when you give this right, you have an escalation of conflict. There is more likelihood of these nuclear weapons being used. Until you tell us why none of that holds true, we don't think that you are able to win this debate. Now, coming to what you brought out in your DPM speech, you told us that alliances are more likely to happen on our side. Firstly, we think that this is problematic because you think that alliances don't exist in the status quo. Of course, alliances exist in the status quo. No country is just an individual country without a backing from a powerful other country. We think alliances are already exist. Secondly, even if you think alliances are more likely to exist, please explain to us why that is a bad thing. We don't think alliances are a bad thing until you tell us exactly why these alliances are a problem, why when countries group together it's a problem. We don't think that that outcome is actually negative. And finally, you told us about how the Security Council, which comprises of just 5 countries, dictates what the world security is. Yes, because what they still end up doing is they protect the world security. They aren't allowing conflicts to actually escalate. What happens on your side is that there is no protection of this of the security. The world can have conflict escalating to the level of nuclear warfare. We don't think that world security is actually protected on your side. And what you also didn't tell us is who will be giving this right to the people. We think that it will still be the Security Council giving the right to these people. So we don't see how that is something that is mutually exclusive. Finally, what they told you is that it stops the proliferation of nuclear weapons. They say that 5 countries dictate the security of the world. How does it change? It just doesn't. Because you give them the right, just because you give these countries the right, Syria can't magically acquire nuclear weapons. This is what we mean when we say that this right disproportionately affects the poor. It only allows the rich states which already have nuclear weapons to get more and more nuclear weapons. They still have to compromise their beliefs and side with right. We told you why countries only form alliances with you when your country can be of use to them in some way. We don't think that this is something that you solve. Now coming to the final response that I have, that is on the right to self-defense and why you're not actually giving this right to self-defense to everyone. Firstly, we'd like to say that this is not applicable to all the states, it's only applicable to the rich states. Secondly, this is not applicable in every situation, you're only making it applicable in certain situations. And finally, what they didn't tell you is why is it that you specifically require nuclear weapons to defend yourself. Nuclear weapons should be the last resort that you go to and shouldn't be something that you think that you can use. We explained to you why this example of Pearl Harbor is exactly why we shouldn't have nuclear weapons on every side, because what happens is that when you have nuclear weapons with a country, they believe that even if there's a small harm against them, they are justified in being able to use these nuclear weapons. We told you why that is harmful. We don't think that side proposition has rebutted that. So at the end of this, what material still remains standing? Our entire principle on how it is about the privileged countries that continue to exert more influence on the underprivileged countries that don't have these weapons still remains standing. And finally, the fact that harms from escalation and the distrust that is caused between countries also remains standing because their DPM didn't have any rebuttals to this. And now coming to my constructive on how this right disproportionately affects people in poor countries. What happens is that this right gives incentives to the countries with nuclear weapons to just get more nuclear weapons, to increase their power base and obtain more of these weapons because they feel threatened by other countries who can now also have nuclear weapons in whatever way that that they get these weapons. Which means that these countries, which were already influential, become more influential, become more powerful. How does this disproportionately affect the poor nations? These poor nations, which have more important things about the people of their country, countries like Somalia and Chad, which are worried, countries like Somalia, which are worried about feeding their very people, instead now need to worry about obtaining nuclear weapons simply because the threat of nuclear weapons from other countries increases. So they think that they need to be able to protect their citizens, and instead of being able to fund money into buying, into getting some food for their people, they instead think that they need to be able to fund nuclear weapons in order to be able to protect their country. At this point, I'll take you.
Now, if you're telling us that simultaneously these countries have had nuclear weapons but haven't used it, the moment other countries acquire nuclear weapons, they're going to use it. Tell us how your principles still stand.
We're not saying that they're going to use it, we're saying that they just have incentive to get more of them, to be able to get more of them so that they can show the other countries that they are still more powerful. We think that this is a power play that this scenario creates, something that isn't there right now. So what ends up happening is that this is a misappropriation of funds. Instead of getting food for citizens of these countries, they instead get into this idea of they need to be able to maintain something that they don't actually need in status quo, but they think they need when you have this right given to everyone, because they are afraid that maybe a country will now use nuclear weapons against me, when in the past there was not something that was happening because this right didn't exist. Which means that for all of these reasons, we have been able to tell you that we protect the people within these poor countries. We ensure that there is no escalation of conflict. We ensure that as is in status quo, nuclear weapons will only be used once and will never have ever been used again. Something that side proposition cannot confirm, and therefore we are very proud to oppose.
The speaker spoke for 8 minutes, 19 seconds. 819.
I thank the second opposition speaker, and I would like to invite third opposition speaker to conclude the proposition
Ladies and gentlemen, what side opposition needs to understand in today's debate is that under both sides of the House, these countries are still going to have nuclear weapons. And what we need to understand about this is, under our side, we sort of officially declare that they have nuclear weapons, which means that they are regulated, right? We think this is something that came out in the first and second speech, something that they haven't engaged with. Under their side, which is status quo, we don't get any regulation because we allow countries to have these nuclear weapons. And like in situations such as America, we think they did not declare to the United Nations that they had like the atomic bomb, right? But they still use it. We think this is something we need to understand. And something that I really like about their case is that everything that they've told us so far and all of the examples that they've used about atrocities are things that are happening in status quo, which is something that they're advocating for. Ladies and gentlemen, we already win today's debate. Furthermore, we need to ask ourselves two questions, right? The first question, what does awarding this right do in terms of warfare? Secondly, is it principally justified? So first thing that they told us under the first issue is that no country that is wealthy should be awarded this right, which is fairly contradictory when they tell us that like the poor countries won't be able to like afford these. But that's something that we'll deal with. No, thank you. Furthermore, we think whether we award them this right or not, these rich countries are still going to have these nuclear weapons, right? We think when it comes to countries such as Russia, when it comes to countries such as the United States, they're going to have these nuclear weapons. And what the problem with this is, they can produce as many as they want, right? They can produce as many nuclear weapons as they want under their side, but under our side, under our means of accountability, we think we cap the amount of weapons that they can possess, right? We think this is what mitigates the problems, and that's why they're really used today's debate. Second thing that they told us that this thing caused disproportionate war in terms of wealthier countries that can afford these, right? Number one, the first thing we need to understand is that under status quo, under their model, disproportionate war already exists, right? We think that you need to understand the fact that when countries are rich, they definitely have better militaries than poor countries, right? We think no one in this debate changes that, and that's something that they need to understand. Second thing that needs to come from here, they gave us this example of Pearl Harbor, right? So I'm going to tell you why that example works against them. Number one, first thing we need to understand, the main reason why this atrocity was huge and the war was disproportional was because there was no means of accountability for the US. Because at that point in time, they were the only people with the atomic bomb. We think that's something that they needed to understand in today's debate, and that's something they failed to engage with. How do we change that under our side? We think when multiple countries have this atomic bomb, or have these nuclear weapons, we think we create a means of accountability, right? We think when Russia developed the atomic bomb, USA still had it, but they didn't use it for over 50 years. In status quo, they still haven't used it, right? Because they are scared of retaliation. We think this is something that we have on our side of the house, and that's something that they need to engage with. Something else that they told us that, this is something that I really liked about their case. They told us we don't need these nuclear weapons because in status quo, the Security Council is already doing enough in order to cause peace in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, look at the Middle East. Look at North Korea. Look at Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, when the United Nations actively says we're going to leave Syria and let them handle their own problems, we think it's disingenuous for side opposition to tell us, listen, they're doing enough. We think this is why they've already lost today's debates in the House yet, because they don't understand what's happening. So cool. Something else that they told us that they won't actually use these nuclear weapons. It's something that came out in the second speech, that they won't use these nuclear weapons. They'll just be incentivized to get more. So number one, this contradicts your entire case about how this will cause atrocities and create mass destruction. That's the first thing. Second thing, if they're going to have them and not use them, cool. We think we don't get mass destruction, and that's what Where's the Proposition are advocating for, and we think that's something you need to understand in today's debate. But furthermore, before I move on to my second issue, I'm open to POIs.
At the point at which US can afford to buy 20 military nuclear weapons, while a country like South Korea could only afford one, how does that increase accountability in any way?
Cool. So that's status quo. That's a problem that's occurring under your side. First thing we need to understand. Second thing, first half of my speech, everything I told you, not even just the first half of my speech. Daisy came up here and told you about this. Saxon came up here and told you about this. We told you how, when we create this, we declare it, we think it's something that's legal, right? We think we get some sort of regulation within this instance. And what happens is, we cap the amount of atomic weapons that a country can possess. We think this is how we mitigate the problems that you guys speak about, problems that are still occurring under your model. That's why we win. Second thing that so move on to my second issue, which is this actually principally justified, right? So the first thing here they told us is that, the amount of nuclear weapons that is currently in circulation in the country is good enough in order to restore peace, in order to have no nuclear weapons being launched. First problem with this, it concedes to our analysis of the fact that having nuclear weapons means that we don't have a threat within society. Secondly, we think the problem with this is, under status quo, we do have a threat of nuclear weapons, right? We think when we get countries such as Korea and so forth wanting to launch these nuclear weapons and launching them for something as futile as someone's birthday, we think this is where we need to understand that the threat is large, and at least we as the proposition are doing something in order to solve it, while as opposition is saying it's cool, we're fine with status quo. Something else that they told us that they told us that the government would somewhat, this analysis is something that they was very strange under their case. They gave us this analysis that the government of a country that's poor would somewhat reprioritize, right? They told us that this government wouldn't be able to provide for the people within their country, and they focus on getting nuclear weapons. So number one, that's an assertion. They didn't prove to us how this would happen. First thing. Secondly, it works on the assumption that every government is going to be irrational and make decisions that are not for the betterment of their people, right? We think this is something that's incredibly wrong. And secondly, it doesn't engage with our analysis on how these countries would be able to form alliances. So even those countries that don't necessarily have the money to purchase these nuclear weapons would actively be protected within status quo. We think that's why we're in today's debate. Something else that they told us that like if we give people the right to have nuclear weapons, they'll get more. They'll want to get more. So one problem with this, again, we think they did not do sufficient analysis to prove to us on why this would incentivize it. But furthermore, we think, again, our policy, which is something, till this point in this debate, they haven't engaged with, and we think it will be too late in Opry for them to tell us this. We think we told them that, number one, we will cap the amount of nuclear weapons a country can produce, and we think it's inherently problematic when they keep bringing this up, right? Furthermore, we think with all of the rebuttal we've given you, and the fact that we're actually changing something in today's debate, we think we already win. But furthermore, even if that rebuttal didn't stand, we need to look at exactly why, in which world, do we get better safety. Under their model, which is status quo, number one, by their own analysis, we will get mass destruction because people are launching these nuclear weapons. Secondly, we won't get accountability. And we think this is the problem within their case. Within our case, we think we give you this accountability. And secondly, what happens is we sort of get safety within our world. Ladies and gentlemen, India really needs this win, but I'm sorry they don't deserve it.
Speaker spoke for 8 minutes 19 seconds. 819.
I stand the third proposition speaker, and I would like to call on the third opposition speaker to conclude the opposition statement.
Two things side proposition had to prove in today's debate. Firstly, they had to prove to you why it is principally justified for all countries, be it North Korea or South Korea or the United States, to have the explicit right of having nuclear weapons. Secondly, they also had to prove to you that this is not just a principle on paper, but can also be realized in a utilitarian world. And I am very happy to say that they have done neither across their three speeches. But let's see what they actually have done, right? All we've received a very in first speaker, they came and tell you that all we have to do is prove the principle. Firstly, we think that is not it, right? But then in with they come and tell us, well, we not only have to prove the principle, all we have to prove is that our policy works. When that policy only came, that too in bits, in the second and the third speeches, right? At that point, we believe that purely on strategy, we win this debate. But let's look at the clashes and the points of contention in this debate. Firstly, on principle. Secondly, on which side reduces escalation and increases accountability. And thirdly, on power balance. And fourthly, of course, on which side actually protects the people in poorer countries. Firstly, on principle, right? It was absolutely crucial for them to prove that this principle is absolute. If not all countries, they still had to prove that a majority of these countries can have this right, and in fact can get this right? We told you, and their principle was self-defense. They say when a country is under threat, they have the right to self-defense. You have to realize that this is only applicable if your country is under active threat. If Norway or Switzerland is not threatened by any other country, they still don't have this right under the virtue of self-defense, which means they still cannot protect this absolute right. Right? Even when there is a right to self-defense, we told you that this cannot be realized. Right? We told you that there often exists no money, or even if there exists money, there exists no political capital capital in these countries, right? We told you that this is a right contingent on privilege, a right contingent on resources, and a right contingent on interests, alliances, and who has the big countries on their back. And at that point, we believe that this principle does not stand at the point at which it cannot help a South Sudan, it cannot help most of the countries in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, but can only further establish and further augment the sense of big countries like North Korea and US to further acquire views because they believe it's their inherent right. They have the power and they have the mandate to acquire these weapons to a point where there is no cap, and it's very absurd for Prof. Whip to come and tell us that, well, we can impose caps. This should have come right in PM, right? We believe at the point at which this principle does not apply to multiple countries, the countries who really need this self-defense, this principle falls. Secondly, on the question of escalation and accountability, right? We told you there already exist checks. The only example of a nuclear warfare they can give us is World War II. After that, there have been several advancements in nuclear technology. Multiple other countries have acquired nuclear weapons. Have you heard of a single nuclear attack since then? No. Because this is the clarification that comes in from first speech, right? They tell you that nuclear warfare is just a war of threats. We understand that, right? And the countries who think that they are under genuine threat do have nuclear weapons in status quo. India has nuclear weapons because they believe they are in genuine threat of a nuclear attack from Pakistan, right? The same way, North Korea US is supporting South Korea because North Korea has nuclear weapons and thus the US can help South Korea counter this, right? We believe that whoever needs these nuclear weapons in the first place either already has them or has countries who have them backing them. And at that point, there is no marginal increase in the countries that acquire these weapons on their side, right? And then, there is no actual change in the power balance except for the fact that if US now has, say, 10 nuclear bombs, they can now get 20 nuclear bombs under the pretense of this right? Whereas at the same time, South Korea can only militarize to one because firstly they don't have enough money, and secondly, even if they do have that, there is no political capital within these countries, right? The people will actively vote against this because they've seen what's happened in Japan. They've seen Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we believe that a lot of countries are still very perplexed about the concept of a nuclear war. And let's come to the issue of accountability, right? They tell you that now, because certain countries have weapons, they can somehow hold bigger countries accountable. This doesn't happen. Why? Because at the point at which you're trying to equalize the scale, bigger countries who have more resources, more money, more political capital, and more defense spending are just going to spend more and more in acquiring the nuclear weapons to still maintain the power imbalance that already exists. At that point, we don't see any difference on their side except that there are more and more nuclear weapons and more money spent on this, at which point they don't help either accountability or escalation, and even if they do, that is because the status quo already has those checks and all they're doing is increasing the number of weapons. And at this point, if they do have something to say, I will take it.
If ideal analysis that the rights are only applicable when there's an active threat, would you take away the right of a person in Denmark who doesn't have any active threat to their rights?
Ma'am, you're the one who said if the country doesn't want to take this up, they can opt out, right? At the point at which they can't tell you that this right is universal, and at the point at which someone in Denmark doesn't have the incentive to take up this right, we don't see why this exists, right? Whoever wants to avail the right of nuclear weapons already has it. Who doesn't need it anyways, right? And then it's very interesting that they only bring up the example of North Korea, right? We believe that South Korea has signed non-proliferation, right? They haven't in any way acquire nuclear weapons, and at that point, their only example, major example, falls, right? And thirdly, as to which side actually helps the people in poor countries. We tell you, at a point at which everyone is adding to their nuclear arsenal, poor countries will also, out of circumstances, have to be forced to add nuclear weapons. This is what happened in Iran, right? At the point at which US were actively enforcing sanctions and still Iran continued to develop nuclear weapons in their backyard, is the point at which the people of these countries suffer. And when more and more money is allocated to realize this so-called right to obtain nuclear weapons, it is these poor people that suffer. It is these poor people's money that go out of their pockets. And at the point at which this right doesn't help anyone and this right actively hurts these people, we believe that we won this debate. Thank you.
The speaker spoke for 8 minutes and 24 seconds. 824.
I thank the third opposition speaker, and I would like to invite the opposition reply speaker.
Panel, this debate is about one thing only. On which side is the world a safer place? On which side are there fewer weapons of mass destruction out there? That side is only side opposition today. So let's look at what proposition has given you, right? They gave you something shaky in the way of a principle. At PM, they told you this principle applies to all countries, regardless of who they are, regardless of circumstance, regardless of whether they are rogue states, and regardless of whether they can actually access this right? And we told you why rights that are tokenistic are not really right. That's like saying you have a right to equality, but I was only kidding. It's actually tokenistic. I'm going to oppress you anyway because you are poor. We don't see how that stands on their side, right? We counter this by saying that tokenistic rights don't help in any way, by claiming that when you have the by claiming that when you don't have the means to facilitate a right, it's not actually a right? And this facilitation was really, really important to their case. They pushed a principle of self-defense. When you do not have the power to acquire the weapons you need to defend yourself, they are not really solving the problem they claim that exists. And we think that is when they lose this principle. What did we tell you, right? We told you that we believe nobody should have this right to cause mass destruction. We told you it was regrettable that there are so many countries out there who already have weapons. And we told you that the best way to engage with this is not to have more weapons in the world, but to have less, right? To work towards non-proliferation and not to give these arbitrary rights to kill people, and hundreds of thousands of people, to countries just because you think that you're protecting this right to self-defense, which we've already told you they really aren't, right? When they saw that they couldn't win this on a principle clash, they tried to push one single outcome. We saw this come out at government when they finally gave their PM speech, right? So apparently, now that everyone has a right to nuclear weapons, they're going to come together and discuss how much of each nuclear weapon type they all have, and they're going to put up records, right? We don't see how this works at all. We've already told you in our speeches why nuclear weapon possession is so that you can threaten another country, right? So that you can cause fear in another country's leadership. We don't see why any country has the incentive to go out and tell their enemies, we have so many nuclear weapons, how many do you have? We don't see how any of that stands on their side. They gave us absolutely no analysis on how this leads to accountability, right? When they don't have any outcome whatsoever, they simply try to nitpick our case, and they did not succeed when it came to that. What did we give you, right? We gave you strong analysis across the course of 3 speeches. We told you how this leads to an escalation of proliferation rates. We told you why that was a bad thing, right? We told you why that increased the chance of nuclear warfare. We told you why it is a terrible thing to facilitate more people dying, right? We told you why this causes a culture of mistrust, even between allies. We told you why that was a bad thing because it leads to no cooperation. We told you how this leads to disproportionate violence and unnecessary violence. They didn't engage with absolutely any of that, and they thought they could get away by not engaging. We don't think that stands stands, right? We think all this material still stands, and they now have no opportunity to engage with it, right? We told you while we're the side with fewer weapons, right? How this means there's less chance that a city is obliterated. We told you how this means there's less chance that thousands of people are murdered, and we told you that how this means that there's less chance that generations face deformities, face cancer, and face a total inability to live due to the mistakes of their ancestors. We told you just why so many nuclear weapons are such a bad thing, and side proposition didn't engage with any of that. They're still claiming that nuclear warfare is a good thing and it is a right. We don't think in any case nuclear warfare is the right. Nobody has the right to murder thousands of people. We are very, very proud to oppose.
I'd like opposition reply, and now I'd like to invite opposition reply speaker to close the debate.
In today's debate, we believe that Side India has presented us with a beautiful case, right? But we believe that it's beautiful, but also one that is idealistic and one that doesn't actively play out into society in today. We believe that a more realistic side of today's debate is more the one that is side proposition. We want to thank India for engaging debate, but we believe firstly, we didn't have to prove to you that countries have the capacity or the ability to do this. We believe that in a belief that motion, we only have to prove principally why we would allow countries to access these resources. But we're going to tell you anyway, if we're going to play in a world where we are talking about the country's capacity, we're going to be summarizing this within our reply, and the three main questions. Firstly, this idea about what actively happens to the most vulnerable actors in today's debate, which we can mold with India's cases in poorer countries. Secondly, what's best for the international community, and should this right exist ever in the first place? So let's assume we're talking about how we can actualize this motion in today's debate and what happens in poor countries. We're going to be doing this under a comparative. On Side India's case, they're talking about the status quo, right? One in which supposedly nuclear weapons don't exist. But also in their third speaker, they concede to the fact that post the 1960s, America continued to make nuclear weapons, but hasn't used them in today's debate. So then they concede to our entire analysis about even if you produce them, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be using them in today's society. But let's look what happens to the poor countries. Within status quo, we believe that these poor countries, because we believe the threat of nuclear warfare is in fact apparent that these attacks actually have happened, e.g. North Korea over the past 5 months in today's debate, then what we believe is that those countries in poor underdeveloped nations are forced to pick a side. Either they go with the so-called more liberalist America, or they go with the North Korea, where they don't identify with the ideologies. But rather, what we're proposing in today's debate is where we allow countries to access this right and make it legal in today's debate, where countries in underdeveloped worlds, even if they don't have the capacity to do so, have the ability to form alliances with countries that they agree with. We believe that countries like South Korea and Nigeria have the economic capital in today's debate to develop nuclear weapons. They just don't have the capacity to do that right now because we've created an illegal system in today's debate where only countries like Iran, North Korea, and America have those nuclear weapons in today's debate. And we can't destroy these nuclear weapons in today's debate because we can't just simply destroy nuclear weapons. The only way you get rid of them is by activating them into our world. Secondly, let's talk about what is best for the international community. They then conceded to combat in today's debate, but even if we allow countries to have these nuclear weapons, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to act upon this in today's debate, because we believe the threat of a war and nuclear warfare, if it's so detrimental, is not a risk that countries are willing to take if they're going to sacrifice the lives of their individuals. Secondly, we believe that it only takes one nuclear bomb to destroy the world. We don't believe that producing them means a greater threat. We believe one is a threat in itself. Okay, and thirdly, let's talk about this last idea in today's debate, and this is where we believe the main clash really came in. Should this right actively exist principally and in reality in today's debate? We find it very interesting on Side India's case, where they say that a right can only exist when it's actualized and when there's a necessity. And we don't believe that that's a right, but that's actually what a right is. We believe that rights are an international idea, and if you don't actualize them, that doesn't mean that the right is a privilege in today's debate. We just believe that that right exists and you haven't actualized it because you don't have the means to do so. When we give individuals rights, we don't believe that it's supposed to opt in or opt out of it. We give you the ability to, we give you the ability to choose whether you want to act upon that right, but we hold you accountable if you don't want to hold that right. What we told you was specific in the important in today's debate, and the kind of benefit that you haven't engaged with in today's debate, is the idea in which we offer protection to countries that previously never would have protection. Countries like South Korea, which have an threat of nuclear warfare on a constant day-to-day basis from their bordering countries like North Korea, which we know, one, have the presence of nuclear warfare, but secondly, have acted on this and have continued unsuccessful warfare. We believe that the downfall of India's case in today's debate is their unwillingness and not willing to make their matter work and adapt to the fact that nuclear weapons do exist in today's society. We believe that their case is premised on this false idea that nuclear weapons don't actually exist. They do exist. We even know that this is the case, and we believe that that's why we're having this debate today, because we know that the threat is one element, but it's one that's been acted upon. So if we agree, if we stand on the side that best protects the international community and best secures the safety, but even furthermore believes that the production of nuclear weapons doesn't automatically lead to complete meltdown in nuclear warfare, and one that recognizes that rights are important and we should afford them to all, and not recognize that nuclear weapons should only be afforded to rich countries who stand beside South Africa.